Ça, c'est quoi? C'est le... Attends. C'est un papier de-
Hello to everybody. Please take your seats. I ask you to take your seats.
My eyes. Thanks. No, it's fine.
Good morning, dear colleagues. We are about to start our meeting. Please take your seats again. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to remind you that our meeting is being recorded and streamed live on our website. As you may probably know, the chair of our committee, Birgir Toriansson, has left our assembly, so I will be substituting him here in my capacity as vice chair of the committee. I note that there are a number of new members on our committee, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us for the first time. Please also note that as announced by the table office, the list of speakers for debates during this committee meeting was closed 1 hour ago. All additional requests for the floor will be considered only if time allows. Thank you for your cooperation. Due to the time constraints, I would kindly ask to limit your interventions to 3 minutes. We may need to shorten this time depending on how our meeting progresses. Please pay attention to the timer, which is visible on the screens. So now we are moving to the first item, adoption of the agenda. Dear colleagues, I call the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security to order. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for today's meeting. The draft agenda of this meeting was circulated to all delegations in advance. Since the Secretariat has not received any comments on the agenda, I will assume there are no objections to its adoption. Thank you. The agenda is adopted. Distinguished colleagues, it is my Honored to open today's meeting of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security. I welcome you all and thank you for your participation. I'd like also to welcome all new members to this committee. Dear colleagues, the OSCE-EPA winter meeting is a key opportunity for us as parliamentarians to engage with the representatives of the OSCE's governmental side. It serves as a crucial platform for dialogue, fostering a deeper understanding of the challenges we face and allowing us to identify practical solutions. It is also an occasion to reinforce our shared commitment to the OSCE's core principles and enhance cooperation between the parliamentary and the executive dimensions of the organization. Last year, our cooperation with the governmental side was particularly strong. A good example is our committee rapporteur, Mr. Tobias Winkler, taking part in the OSCE Annual Security Review Conference. His contribution helped highlight the importance of parliamentary engagement in security matters and demonstrated how our collective efforts can influence the broader security agenda of the OSCE-EPA. I hope we will be able to continue our strong partnership also this year. However, the OSCE continues to face serious challenges. On an institutional level, the organization has encountered persistent difficulties in reaching consensus on key administrative matters, including the adoption of its budget and the appointment of essential leadership positions. These delays not only hinder its ability to carry out its mandate, but also raise concerns about the long-term effectiveness of the organization. Moreover, we have witnessed deliberate efforts to obstruct discussions in the Forum for Security Cooperation. These challenges underscore the urgent need for member states to recommit to the OSCE's values and mission and ensure that it remains an effective and responsive institution. The most pressing security challenge remains Russia's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine. This war represents not only a direct assault on Ukraine, but also a fundamental violation of the principle that underpin European security. Over the past months, discussions have intensified on whether the war will conclude in 2025. However, it is imperative to stress that any discussions and negotiations about Ukraine's future must take place only with Ukraine's full involvement and with unwavering respect for its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Attempts to impose external solutions or disregard Ukraine's legitimate interests will only undermine prospects for a just and lasting peace. Beyond the immediate military concerns, Ukraine's resilience and post-conflict rehabilitation must be a top priority. The OSCE has an essential role to play in assisting Ukraine's recovery, supporting democratic governance, and ensuring that the rule of law prevails. It is critical that we mobilize resources to help Ukraine rebuild its infrastructure, provide humanitarian assistance, those affected, and create mechanisms for long-term stability. Ukraine's recovery is not just about reconstruction, it is about ensuring its sovereignty, security, and ability to determine its own future, free from external coercion. Beyond Ukraine, we must also focus on other geopolitical challenges impacting security in the OSCE area. The security situation in the South Caucasus remains fragile, with ongoing disputes that require sustained diplomatic engagement and confidence-building measures. In the Republic of Moldova, hybrid threats, in particular increased disinformation campaigns, continue to challenge democratic stability. Belarus, meanwhile, remains deeply entangled in geopolitical tensions, with internal repression and military cooperation with Russia exacerbating regional concerns. We must also remain vigilant against evolving threats such as cyber warfare, misinformation, and foreign interference, which pose significant risk to national and regional security. Addressing these multifaceted challenges requires strengthening collaboration, resilience, and adherence to the OSCE's fundamental principles. Additionally, we must acknowledge the shifting global security landscape. We are witnessing a world where traditional alliances and commitments are being questioned, and where abrupt policy shifts threaten long-established foundations of stability. Political pronouncements, once dismissed as rhetoric, are now translating into actions that challenge sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, and create uncertainty among partners. These shifts not only embolden those who seek to undermine the rules-based order, but also give rise to forces that exploit instability for their own gains. It is imperative that we, as parliamentarians, remain vigilant, uphold the values of cooperation and stability, and reinforce the importance of international law in maintaining global security. Today's special debate on nuclear security is particularly timely. The risks associated with nuclear escalation, the security of nuclear infrastructure, and the potential for catastrophic consequences have never been more pressing. The war against Ukraine has brought new urgency to these concerns, with repeated attacks on nuclear facilities posing serious risks to regional and global security. We must address the broader implications of nuclear deterrence, arms control, and non-proliferation, recognizing that the irresponsible weaponization of nuclear threats undermines global safety and security. I thank Ambassador Tibor Tut for joining us to introduce this debate, and I look forward to our discussions on how we can reinforce nuclear security frameworks and prevent further escalation. Colleagues, our work in this committee is more important than ever. As parliamentarians, we have a unique role in supporting conflict resolution, peace building, and the long-term stability of our region. Beyond policy making, we serve as a bridge between governments and citizens, advocating for solutions that reflect both national and international security needs. Parliamentary diplomacy is an essential tool for fostering dialogue, and we must continue to use it to de-escalate tensions, strengthen cooperation, and promote durable peace. This year also marks the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, a cornerstone of the OSCE's principles. I expect there will be many discussions today and beyond about the significant landmark, and I want to emphasize that it is imperative that we reaffirm our commitment to these values, ensuring that OSCE remains a central pillar of security and cooperation in our region. Upholding the spirit of Helsinki means not only defending sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also reinforcing mechanisms for dialogue, trust, and mutual understanding. I urge all of us to seize this moment to strengthen our efforts in promoting peace and security. I hope that the discussions we have today and the ideas expressed in our debate will serve as a valuable foundation for our rapporteur in preparing the committee's resolution and report. The insights we share here should guide our collective efforts in addressing security challenges and strengthening the OSCE's role in promoting stability. I look forward to a constructive and meaningful discussion today. Through dialogue, cooperation, and a strong commitment to OSCE principles, we can contribute to solutions for the challenges ahead. Thank you. Now we pass to item number 3. We'll proceed to the next item to our agenda, Mr. Tobias Winkler's presentation in his capacity as rapporteur and the preparation of the report for the upcoming annual session in Porto. Mr. Tobias, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kostal. Distinguished colleagues, before we begin our discussions, I would like to extend my gratitude to our chair and to the distinguished speakers joining us today for their readiness to contribute to this important meeting. Their insights will be invaluable as we examine the pressing security challenges facing the OSCE region. Over the past year, I have had the privilege to engage closely with the OSCE First Dimension institutions, including through my participation in the OSCE Annual Security Review Conference. These exchanges have reinforced the critical role of parliamentary engagement in strengthening security cooperation, and I look forward to continued collaboration in the year ahead. I trust that our discussions today will provide valuable perspectives on how we can collectively address the evolving security landscape in the OSCE region. This year, we mark an important milestone in OSCE history. It has been 15 years since the signing of the Helsinki Final Act. These past 5 decades have borne witness to historical commitments that have shaped the security architecture of Europe. Commitments that enshrine the principles of inviolable borders, respect of sovereignty, the non-use of force, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. 50 years ago, our leaders envisioned a framework of cooperation built on dialogue and mutual respect. Tragically, they could not have foreseen the scale of violations and neglect that our region faces today. The spirit of Helsinki, once a beacon of peace, is under attack. The OSCE was founded as a platform for dialogue, grounded in a shared commitment to a rules-based international order and a willingness to engage in fair and open exchange. Its 3 pillars, the platform, the openness for dialogue, and the acceptance of international rule-based order, that are crucial for the OSCE and for their existence, and to fulfill these conditions are necessary to fulfill our tasks. Throughout its history, even if in difficult times, the organization has relied on this fundamental principle that all parties must be willing to talk. Maintaining this platform is therefore essential, not just as a forum for discussion, but as a mechanism for cooperation rooted in international law in the past, in the present, and in the future. Nowhere is the attack on the spirit of Helsinki clearer than in Ukraine, where we are just days away from the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale war of aggression. This is the most severe test of European security and multilateralism since the Helsinki Final Act was signed nearly half a century ago. But let me be clear, Russia's violations of the UN Charter and the fundamental principles of the OSCE did not begin on February 24 in 2022. They started much earlier, in 2014, with the illegal occupation and annexation of Crimea and the subsequent war in eastern Ukraine. What began with hybrid warfare, disinformation, and covert operations has since evolved into a brutal campaign of destruction, aimed at eradicating Ukraine's very identity. Today, Russian forces continue to commit atrocities, targeting civilian infrastructure, forcibly deporting Ukrainian children, and engaging in widespread human rights abuses in blatant defiance of international law. The Russian Federation's escalation continues unabated. Over the past year, we have witnessed relentless missile strikes on Ukrainian cities, targeted attacks on critical energy infrastructure, and growing military cooperation with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, further complicating regional security dynamics. The forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children, a crime that began in 2014 and intensified with the full-scale invasions, remains particularly concerning. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has remained steadfast in its unwavering support for Ukraine, consistently condemning Russia's military aggression and emphasizing the need for accountability. We have been clear. Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity remain non-negotiable. The international community must ensure that the perpetrators of war crimes do not escape justice. Furthermore, Russia continues to act with impunity against international institutions. The arbitrary detention and legitimate legal proceedings against 3 OSCE officials serving in this special monitoring mission are unacceptable. We call for their immediate release and reaffirm our commitment to defending the principles of this organization was founded upon. The recent visit of the OSCE PA Bureau to Kiev, in which I had the privilege to participate, reminded us all that Ukraine's security is synonymous with the security of the OSCE region. Russia's brutal and unjustifiable war aggression will remain at the forefront of the OSCE PA's agenda until the war ends and Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are fully restored. However, while responding to the immediate crisis remains essential, we must also look to the future. Strengthening Ukraine's resilience, both during this conflict and in preparation for post-war recovery, is paramount. Economic support, infrastructure rebuilding, and the security guarantees will be essential in ensuring a stable and prosperous Ukraine beyond the war. Another critical challenge to our security framework concerns nuclear safety and the protection of critical infrastructure. Today, heightened military activity near Ukraine's nuclear power plants poses an unprecedented risk, with some facilities coming under attack and raising serious concerns over potential consequences. Never before has a war been waged in proximity to so many major nuclear installations, amplifying the dangers for regional and global security. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, was consistently warned that attacks on nuclear facilities served no strategic purpose and only heightened the risk of catastrophe. Upholding the IAEA's indispensable pillars for nuclear safety is essential, and any attempt to weaponize nuclear infrastructure must be unequivocally condemned. Today's dedicated debate on nuclear safety, escalation risk, and the protection of critical infrastructure will provide an important opportunity to explore these urgent challenges in greater depth. Let me be clear on that. The protection of critical infrastructure must be addressed with the same urgency as the rules-based order. Targeting such infrastructure should be considered an absolute taboo, met with international condemnation and ostracism. In an era of hybrid warfare, ensuring the safety and security of critical infrastructure, as well as the realms of cyberspace, is absolutely essential. Unlike military assets, critical infrastructure is far more vulnerable than it is protectable, creating an asymmetric threat where it is easy to destroy but difficult to defend. Without mutual trust in safeguarding these essential systems, everyone stands to lose. The impact of Russia's action extends beyond Ukraine, with Moldova facing airspace violations, energy insecurity, and the displacement of Ukrainian refugees. Moldova has faced intensified disinformation campaigns and cyber attacks designed to influence policies and to destabilize its institutions. As highlighted by the international observation mission in which the OSCE participated, interference directed from abroad, including through illicit monetary incentives, undermined the conduct of Moldova's 2024 presidential elections. Similar attempts can be expected in the upcoming parliamentary elections, underscoring the need for strong international observation. Meanwhile, the continued presence of Russian troops in Transnistria remains a clear violation of Moldova's sovereignty and OSCE principles. We call on Russia to fulfill its commitments under the OSCE Istanbul Summit of 1999 and the UN General Assembly Resolution 72-282 by withdrawing its forces. Russia's exploitation of Moldova's energy dependency is a tool of influence, and the severe energy crisis in Transnistria must also be addressed with renewed efforts towards energy diversification and cybersecurity resilience. These steps are essential to safeguarding Moldova's sovereignty and independence. In this context, the work of the OSCE mission to Moldova remains crucial in supporting stability, promoting dialogue, and assisting the country in strengthening its democratic institutions and resilience against external threats. The situation in Belarus remains a serious concern. The deployment of Russian troops, nuclear missiles, and military infrastructure further undermines regional security and Belarusian sovereignty. Belarus' support for Russia's invasion, including the forcible transfer of Ukrainian children, violates international law and human rights. Meanwhile, its growing dependence on Moscow, the imprisonment of some 1,300 political prisoners, and the lack of free and fair elections, most recently in the fraudulent 2025 presidential elections, highlight ongoing repression. Despite these challenges, we must remain firm in supporting the Belarusian people's aspirations for democracy and human rights. Dear colleagues, Russia's aggression in Ukraine and its hybrid warfare tactics throughout the region represent just one of the many evolving conflicts and crises that continue to shape the OSCE security landscape. We must also remain vigilant to broader geopolitical developments that impact stability across our region and beyond. Turning to the South Caucasus, I acknowledge the progress in the peace negotiation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The ongoing delimitation of the border between the two nations is a positive step forward, and we strongly encourage both parties to continue this process in good faith. A timely, mutually acceptable conclusions to the peace process is essential for ensuring lasting stability. Sustainable peace must be built upon the fundamental principles of sovereignty, the inviolability of borders, and territorial integrity. We stand ready to support any effort that strengthens dialogue and reinforces the path towards reconciliation and durable peace. In Georgia, the political landscape remains tense following the October 2024 parliamentary elections. Allegations of electoral irregularities, political polarizations, and concerns over democratic backsliding have heightened tensions, underscoring the need for a transparent and inclusive political process. The OSCE, through its observation efforts, has stressed the importance of upholding democratic principles, media freedom, and judicial independence. At the same time, the right to peaceful assembly must be fully respected, and the treatments of protesters, as well as reports of politically motivated detentions, requires close attention. The OSCE EPA must also keep Central Asia and Mongolia high on its agenda. Situated between major geopolitical powers, the region faces unique security and development challenges, including competition over resources and unresolved territorial issues. In this context, strengthening regional cooperation is essential to fostering stability and resilience. I welcome the recent announcement by Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan regarding the full completion of the description of their mutual border, an important step towards regional stability. I hope this spirit of cooperation continues and serves as a model for further progress in addressing outstanding challenges across the region. The unresolved situation in Cyprus continues to strain relations between Turkey and Greece, affecting broader regional stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. Recent tensions over territorial rights, energy exploration, and military posturing underscore the urgent need for renewed diplomatic engagement. A lasting resolution must be based on international law, including relevant UN Security Council resolutions, and prioritize confidence-building measures between the parties. At the same time, the OSCE EPA cooperation with its Mediterranean partners for cooperation remains essential in fostering dialogue, strengthening regional stability, and promoting mutual understanding. We must also recognize the interconnectedness of global security dynamics, including shifting geopolitical alignments. Recent statements and actions by US President Donald Trump towards Canada, Denmark, Mexico, and Panama raise concerns about the potential challenges to the rules-based international order. Additionally, the Arctic region is becoming an area of growing geopolitical competition, with increased military activity and resource exploration intensifying tensions. It is crucial to ensure that this strategically important region remains a zone of peace, dialogue, and international cooperation. It is essential to uphold multilateral cooperation and ensure that stability, which the OSCE has long worked to maintain, is not undermined. The security in the Middle East is deeply linked to the security of the OSCE region. As conflicts abroad have a direct impact on European security migration patterns and broader regional stability, I welcome the recently brokered ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, facilitated by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. This agreement has already led to the release of 19 Israeli hostages, 4 dead bodies today, and more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, and has put a temporary halt to more than 15 months of intense conflict and human suffering. However, we must recognize that the ceasefire alone does not address the root causes of the conflict, which requires sustained diplomatic engagement. As stated in last year's committee resolution, the ongoing hostilities and instability in the region pose significant threats, including terrorism, radicalization, hate speech, and the rise of xenophobia and Islamophobia, while widespread anti-Semitism has returned to an alarming extent. We must firmly support Israel's right to exist and defend itself in line with its rights and obligations under international humanitarian law, while we also must remain committed to the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state that can coexist peacefully alongside Israel. A balanced approach is necessary, recognizing the complexities of the region, of the history, including the destabilization influence of Iran and its affiliated proxy groups. Furthermore, ensuring the uninterrupted flow of humanitarian aid and protecting humanitarian workers remain critical priorities. The laying down of arms is essential for progress in the peace process, and the regional actors must play a role in fostering the environment conducive to sustainable peace. In this regard, Arab states shall recognize that the responsibility for humanitarian support to Palestinian territories cannot rest solely on Western and European states. Another pressing concern in the region is the ongoing crisis in Syria. Stability and reconstruction efforts remain critical, as does the protection of human rights, particularly those of vulnerable minorities. Refugees choosing to return must be assured voluntary repatriation with the necessary safeguards to ensure their safety and dignity. A long-term approach to stabilization is necessary to prevent further cycles of conflict and displacement. Distinguished colleagues, ensuring the effectiveness of OSCE requires a strong commitment to its executive structures, particularly its field missions, which serve as vital instruments for conflict prevention, early warning, and post-conflict rehabilitation. It is imperative that these missions receive the necessary political and financial support to fulfill their mandates effectively. At a time when multilateral engagement is increasingly under pressure, the OSCE's presence on the ground remains indispensable in promoting security, stability, and human rights across the region. Looking ahead, I'm eager to continue working closely with members of this committee, as well as with the OSCE PA ad hoc committees, the Parliamentary Support Team on Ukraine, and the Assembly's special representatives. Strengthening parliamentary engagement remains crucial in advancing the OSCE's mission, and I look forward to our collective efforts in promoting security, stability, and cooperation across the OSCE region. As we assess the security landscape with the OSCE region and beyond, one conclusion stands clear. The principles of the Helsinki Final Act remain central to addressing these challenges. This foundational document serves as a shared commitment by all signatory states to democracy, cooperation, and respect for human rights. It is our responsibility now, as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, to uphold these values and work tirelessly to promote comprehensive and lasting security, from Vancouver to Vladivostok, for this and for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias. Dear colleagues, it is a great pleasure to introduce the new chairperson of the Security Committee of the OSCE Permanent Council and permanent representative of the United Kingdom to the OSCE, Ambassador Neil Holland. Dear Ambassador, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing your insights on the challenges and opportunities ahead for the Security Committee, particularly in light of the current geopolitical landscape and the OSCE's ongoing efforts to support Ukraine. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that introduction. I'm honoured to address this committee in this role, which is new to me, and I'm grateful to the Finnish chairpersonship for appointing me during this 50th anniversary year. As the chair has made clear, the OSCE principles and commitments are fundamental to everything we do. We believe that they're more likely to be realised and implemented when we work in partnership with parliamentarians. Parliamentarians serve important functions, shaping national policy, providing legislative oversight, and bringing together diverging views, including through meetings such as this one. The Security Committee's role is to discuss non-military and political aspects of security. Today's threat landscape is complex. So let me set out my thinking on that context and thus explain our work programme. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine continues to have a devastating effect on Ukraine and the surrounding region. So I'm continuing the good practice of previous chairs in using our committee to discuss the ways that states, partners, the OSCE and its autonomous institutions can further support Ukraine and its neighbours to deal with the impacts of this unjust war. The Bureau's recent trip to Kiev is an important contribution to this. We've seen many states raise at the Ministerial Council and in permanent councils over the past year the intensification of malign and destabilising hybrid activities across our region. Arson, assassination, sabotage and information manipulation are taking place on an industrial scale. There is a role for the Security Committee to understand these threats and share best practice in terms of our national and collective resilience, preparedness and response. Cybersecurity threats are escalating in both scale and impact, encompassing AI-enabled cyber attacks, the convergence of state and non-state actors targeting critical infrastructure, and the increasing availability and irresponsible use of commercial intrusion capabilities. Threats from many types of organised crime are also increasing, despite the concerted efforts of many of our governments. These crimes undermine social cohesion and democratic norms, impact climate change and economic development, and drive instability. As we know, organised crime is driven by the relentless pursuit of money, which continues to be sourced from illicit supply chains of commodities such as drugs, firearms, cultural heritage property, or through the exploitation of people, often the vulnerable, through irregular migration. Organised criminals exploit new technology to avoid detection, and professional enablers are helping to move, use, and conceal their wealth. The threat from terrorism and violent extremism has also not diminished. The threat emanating from Islamic State Khorasan province is in fact increasing. And in the past year, we've seen attacks by the group in several countries across our region, including Turkey and Russia, with many plots disrupted across Europe. Meanwhile, the extreme right-wing terrorism landscape remains fast-moving and fluid, with new groups, grievances, and conspiracies emerging regularly. Radicalized people are younger and continue to engage with a wide range of terrorist narratives online. There are also more transnational links online than ever before. A common theme across every one of these threats is the role that emerging and critical technology is playing or could play to facilitate and enable, as well as provide opportunities to enhance our security. Whether it's quantum computing potentially upending modern encryption and cybersecurity, or generative AI being used to develop misleading content, the next decade will see broad and disruptive technological changes that will be impossible to ignore. In common with the work of the OSCE PA's general and ad hoc committees, our committee work programme seeks to focus on countering these threats, including by implementing our existing commitments. This is a difficult time for our region, and we are working in a time of low trust between many states. Partnerships, remaining aware and alert to threats, and learning from other states are even more important for many of us during these times. I intend to provide Chair's recommendations based on the discussions at each meeting, reflecting my thoughts on actions the OSCE can take going forward on a particular topic. What the OSCE can do remains constrained, of course, by the lack of an agreed budget, on which I urge constructive engagement this year. I also encourage those states who have not paid their arrears to do so. I welcome the voices and experience of civil society, and I will ensure robust civil society representation throughout this year to help guide our work. Gender and human rights are also mainstreamed in our programme. And in line with the CIO's priority on empowering future generations, I will include youth voices. Indeed, youth representatives from the OSCE Dialogue Academy for Young Women from Serbia and Kosovo joined our meeting 2 weeks ago, and they were hugely inspiring. I will also continue to involve the Secretariat and OSCE field presences to help bridge the gap between the work in Vienna and activity on the ground. Mr. Chair, I believe in the potential of the Security Committee as a forum for states to share best practice and work together to implement our shared commitments. This will be the UK's approach during this important anniversary year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for outlining the important work of the OSCE Security Committee. We look forward to working closely with you in the upcoming months. We will now go to our agenda item 5 and hear the presentation of the chair of the OSCE Forum for Security, Cooperation and Permanent Representative of Spain to the OSCE, Ambassador Cristobal Ramon Valdez, who took over the FEC chairmanship in the beginning of the year. Ambassador, we look forward to hearing your insights on the functioning of the FIC and your perspectives on how its mechanisms can be effectively mobilized in the future. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Es un honor para mí tomar la palabra en esta sesión de la Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE para informarles sobre la presidencia española del Foro de Cooperación en materia de seguridad. Como saben, a comienzos de este año, España ha asumido la presidencia de este foro durante el primer cuatrimestre, con un Estado participante comprometido con esta obligación, con un enorme sentido de responsabilidad. Permítanme, en primer lugar, destacar la importancia de 2025, un año histórico en que se cumplen 50 años de la firma del Acta de Helsinki, precisamente bajo la presidencia en ejercicio de la elección por Finlandia. Deseo agradecer a la presidencia finlandesa por el apoyo que nos está dando al inicio de nuestra presidencia, al igual que a Estonia y Dinamarca, como miembros de la Troika del Foro, a la primera comentante a partir del segundo cuatrimestre de 2025 y la segunda gozamiento tras su presidencia en el último cuatrimestre de 2024. Señorías, el pasado 21 de enero, el ministro de Asuntos Exteriores, el excelentísimo señor José Manuel Álvarez, destacó en su intervención de inauguración de nuestra presidencia que en el mandato de creación del Foro, acordado hace ya 33 años, los Estados participantes nos comprometimos a intensificar la cooperación en las cuestiones relacionadas con la seguridad. Este es un objetivo fundamental al que España dedicará sus esfuerzos, pues la cooperación entre nosotros es el único camino para garantizar nuestra seguridad y la solución de los conflictos presentes en la acción de la OSCE. España tiene claro qué marcará la agenda de nuestra presidencia del Foro: la guerra y agresión de la Federación Rusa contra Ucrania. Este mes se alcanzarán los 3 años desde el inicio de la invasión y el apoyo a Ucrania ha sido una prioridad constante para España y lo seguirá siendo hasta que se haga paso a una paz justa y sostenible. Por otra parte, el acelerado desarrollo, despliegue y uso creciente de nuevos sistemas de armas, utilizando tecnologías nuevas emergentes, plantea un nuevo riesgo de proliferación y desestabilización para toda la zona de la OSCE. Las tecnologías nuevas emergentes se están aplicando rápidamente por uso militar y están dando paso a la aparición de nuevos sistemas de armas con potencial de fuerza mucho mayor alcance y precisión. Por lo tanto, los avances tecnológicos están transformando rápidamente la guerra a través de nuevas armas, nuevas tácticas en el campo y una nueva disuasión estratégica. Por ello, España considera que es el momento de reflexionar sobre el rol que debe tener esta organización ante los rápidos avances tecnológicos que están produciendo en el ámbito militar y en particular en el armamento convencional. Este proceso en curso también plantea muy importantes cuestiones políticas, de seguridad, morales y jurídicas, ya que se garantizar un uso militar responsable de la nueva generación de armas, de alta tecnología y un control humano y gubernamental sobre su desarrollo y su uso conforme al derecho internacional humanitario. Pues es importante que España, que la OSCE, ignore esta revolución en curso en su propia área geográfica y es preciso dar nuevos pasos que se encaminen hacia un futuro debate que aspira a garantizar un uso militar responsable de estas nuevas tecnologías. Por ello, dedicaremos así un primer diálogo de seguridad a finales de febrero a un uso militar responsable de las nuevas tecnologías emergentes. Señorías, España, como destacada defensora de la política exterior feminista, dedicará en marzo un segundo diálogo de seguridad sobre la agenda Mujer, Paz y Seguridad, de cara al 25 aniversario de la resolución 1325 del Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas, que se celebrará en septiembre de este año. Como saben, la agenda Mujer, Paz y Seguridad promueve la participación de las mujeres en la prevención, gestión y solución de conflictos. Esta agenda es una prioridad para España, pero también para Finlandia, actual presidencia de ejercicio de la OSCE, por lo que ambos países hemos acordado que este diálogo de seguridad se celebre en un formato conjunto del Consejo Permanente y el Foro. Centramos este diálogo en la importancia de la participación de mujeres, plena y igualitaria, en los procesos de estructuras políticos militares, la contribución de las mujeres en los procesos de paz, toma de decisiones y implementación de la política de seguridad es fundamental para alcanzar una paz y estabilidad duraderas, fomentando así no solo la resolución de conflictos, sino también, sobre todo, prevenirlos. Además, su labor resulta asimismo clave en la implementación del Código de Conducta, que constituye uno de los pilares de la dimensión política militar de la OSCE. Confiamos que este diálogo de seguridad nos permita a todos los estados participantes, así como las estructuras de la OSCE, compartir lecciones aprendidas, analizar obstáculos que persisten y aprender las iniciativas impulsadas, y así continuar avanzando hacia la plena participación de las mujeres también en la misión política militar. Para terminar, me gustaría recordar que atravesamos un momento crucial a nivel internacional en el que es más necesario que nunca defender el multilateralismo y una visión de la seguridad común, integral y basada en reglas y el respeto del derecho internacional. Desde la OSCE y el Foro debemos dar ejemplo y recuperar aquel espíritu de Helsinki. Tantos frutos nos brindó durante tantas décadas para preservar la paz y seguridad en el continente. La Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE puede cumplir un papel muy destacado en defensa de su espíritu, precisamente cuando se cumplen 50 años, un momento especialmente tan difícil. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your presentation. Our next speaker is the newly appointed High Commissioner on National Minorities, Ambassador Christoph Kamp. First, let me congratulate you on this appointment. I'm sure extensive expertise will help to strengthen the important work carried out by your office. And we greatly appreciate your presence here today to share insights into your critical mandate. Your Excellency, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I'm very honored to address you, dear members of Parliamentary Assembly, and thank you for inviting me to address the committee. Your role as democratically elected representatives of citizens in your respective states is crucial in formulating and adopting legal instruments that significantly affect entire ethnic communities, including national minorities. I believe that dialogue with parliamentarians is essential for my institution's ongoing efforts to assist participating states in developing and implementing policies and legislative frameworks that foster cohesive, stable, and resilient societies. I was deeply honored to be appointed as the High Commissioner on National Minorities at the Valletta Ministerial Council 2.5 months ago. As you know, the High Commissioner is tasked with providing early warning and early action to prevent ethnic tensions from escalating into conflict. In diverse societies, promoting policies that facilitate integration is one of the most effective strategies for preventing conflict. How states manage inter-ethnic relations can significantly influence the strength and resilience of their societies in the face of internal and external challenges. The security of each participating state is inextricably linked to the security of every individual living there, and vice versa. As we see in numerous peaceful and prosperous countries with diverse societies, conflicts involving national minority issues are far from inevitable. We see that societal tensions typically stem from inadequate or ineffective integration processes and are exacerbated by political choices. As we see nationalism and divisive rhetoric rising, it is increasingly important for political leaders to protect ethnic and linguistic diversity and avoid instrumentalization of these issues for short-term political goals. It is important to remind ourselves that in the Paris Charter, and I quote, we outlined to reaffirm our deep conviction that friendly relations among our peoples, as well as peace, justice, stability, and democracy, require that the ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and religious identity of national minorities be protected and conditions for the promotion of that identity be created. Also, the High Commissioner has developed recommendations based on international law and on the High Commissioner's extensive experience, how states can support people belonging to national minorities residing in other countries in ways that do not strain bilateral relations. These recommendations underline the dual responsibility of states, which is to protect and promote the rights of persons belonging to national minorities under their jurisdiction, and act as responsible members of the international community with respect to minorities under the jurisdiction of another state. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, as we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, we have a collective responsibility to reflect on and reinforce the principles and commitments that united us half a century ago. In 4 days from now, we will mark 3 years since the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine, a war which causes immense human suffering. My institution has paid close attention to the implication of the war on identity and national minority-related matters. We know that post-war Ukraine will be as diverse, multi-ethnic, and multilingual as it always has been. It is in my mandate to strengthen the resilience of participating states, including Ukraine, from any attempts to instrumentalize national minority issues or efforts to use minorities as an element of external political influencing. Our office is working with Ukraine's institutions to help strengthen its legislative framework and build capacity to deal with national minority issues. An important characteristic of performing my mandate calls for quiet diplomacy, whereby I act in confidence and act independently within and between participating states. My office also implements targeted programs in a number of participating states. And in my work, I aim to combine short-term actions to reduce existing tensions with legal and policy advice to promote the sustainable integration of diverse societies. This advice is based on recommendations and guidelines published by successive High Commissioners over the past 3 decades. These documents cover a range of topics related to national minority issues, from integration to interstate relations. Some documents focus on specific policy areas, such as education, language, political and socio-economic participation, media, policing, and access to justice. This is our thematic approach that can be adapted and applied to different contexts across the OSCE area, and I encourage you to make the best use of these. Following the approach of my predecessors, I continue to prioritize the situation of girls and women from national minority communities. We actively promote the Women, Peace and Security agenda and work closely with the OSCE structures and international partners to advance the situation of girls and women. For some years, my office has been examining the intersectionality of gender and national minorities and the situation of minority women within the context of conflict prevention. My institution intends to translate the findings from several research projects and ongoing expert consultations in this field into practical policy guidance that could help participating states that are looking for concrete ways to contribute to improving the situation of national minority women in their states. Today, environmental issues also dominate discussions within the OSCE participating states. Environmental challenges and access to natural resources, such as water, pose serious risks to peace and security. From the position of my mandate, I see that we need to protect national minorities and majority-minority relations from disproportionate impact of environmental issues. In line with the most recent set of recommendations published by my office, the recommendations on the effective participation of national minorities in social and economic life, I plan to continue to address barriers that national minorities face to economic inclusion. We do this by advocating for equitable access to resources and involving minorities in decision-making processes. This includes supporting policies that enhance their economic resilience in the face of environmental and technological challenges. For the past 30 years, successive High Commissioners have encountered a number of persistent issues that can lead to tensions in society. These issues are often linked to rights, which are only accessible to those with a nationality. Rights that stateless people simply do not have access to due to their legal invisibility. This can leave them marginalized and vulnerable. The High Commissioner has been working on preventing and addressing statelessness as it pertains to national minorities, including through our membership in the Global Alliance to End Statelessness, recently initiated by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. I also continued the work of my predecessors to observe the impact of contested historical legacies and approaches that seek to address on diverse societies. In line with the Ljubljana guidelines on integration of diverse societies, we continue to build expertise in this field. This will enable us to develop specific advice that can help participating states to deal with history and its representation in a responsible way, a way that fosters unity rather than division. Involving and empowering minority youth is also an important part of our work. Our core message is clear. Minority youth hold immense potential to build strong, inclusive societies, thereby reducing the risk of conflict. And last but not least, my office continues to promote identity-related data collection, analysis, and use among participating states to ensure that all data activities are designed to minimize potential tension and instead support the integration of our diverse societies. Let me conclude by highlighting the crucial role that civil society organizations play in ensuring accountability within our societies, which helps to sustain our democratic systems. From this perspective, we are mindful of the increasing trend in the OSCE area of adopting legislation that limits the space of civil society, including those organizations advocating for minority rights. Such legislation can undermine trust and contribute to societal divisions, and I caution against it. To achieve comprehensive security and prevent conflicts, it is essential to unite all sectors of society, including minority groups, while acknowledging their roles and responsibilities. I view parliamentarians as crucial allies in implementing my conflict prevention mandate. I look forward to engaging in a trusting and open discussion with you in the years to come. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Our next speaker is the director of the OSCE Conflict Prevention Center, Ms. Kate Fearon. Ms. Fearon, thank you for your vital efforts in addressing the increasing security challenges in our region, particularly in light of Russia's war against Ukraine. We are all very much looking forward to your presentation. Madam Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to speak at your winter session. I would like to share with you something of the breadth and depth of OSCE's work done by both its 12 field operations and programmatic activities in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, South Caucasus and Southeastern Europe, and by the Secretariat's Conflict Prevention Centre thematic departments across the OSCE area. When I was a rookie negotiator on the Northern Ireland peace process almost 30 years ago, there was an adage that said, we live in interesting times. Well, delegates, I think we've gone far beyond interesting times. We live now very much in turbulent times. Political priorities are evolving quickly, and changes at national levels impact internationally and impact on the perspectives for international organizations like ours. This, unsurprisingly, may have significant impacts for our activities. In this environment, it is not easy to plan and implement our mandates, the mandates that the 57 participating states have given us. Flexibility and agility become more important than ever, but we are nothing in OSCE if not agile. Right across the OSCE region, we work to deliver comprehensive security to the over 1 billion people who live there. We therefore pay attention to comprehensive security risks, be they from climate change, from human rights vulnerabilities, from the small arms and light weapons that proliferate in security vacuums, from corruption that weakens both economic and democratic resilience, from domestic violence that prevents women from realizing their full economic and social potential, or from direct or indirect conflict. Every day, around 2,500 OSCE staff are working on these issues, from Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan to Bender in the Republic of Moldova, from Samarkand in Uzbekistan to Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Irrespective of the particular field operation or thematic mandate, all location-specific and agreed with the host authorities, and of course the 57, there are a number of red threads that run through all of our work, reflecting the core OSCE commitments and principles. So, for example, to support robust media, we have media literacy projects in Tajikistan, in Ukraine, and in Montenegro, and also in Serbia. To help communities live free from criminal or political violence, we have anti-small arms and light weapons SALVA projects in 5 Central Asian participating states and 6 jurisdictions in Southeastern Europe, as well as in Ukraine and Moldova. Because when more women work, economies grow and societies are more stable, we support women's economic empowerment in Tajikistan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and indeed in Armenia. And why do we do this? Seemingly diverse, but ultimately cohering around comprehensive security. Why do we do this work? Because OSCE is about increasing safety, because OSCE is about increasing security, because OSCE is about increasing stability, a key enabling factor for economic growth and prosperity. We do this work right across the OSCE area, together with host governments, principally ministries of interior, foreign affairs, justice, education, environment and defence, and agencies such as the police, border guards, customs officials, but also social welfare, ombudspersons and environmental agencies. We also work with national and local civil society actors, local municipalities and local communities, leveraging our long-standing relationships on the ground to deliver. Combating transnational threats is not confined to where we have field operations. In 2024, for example, we worked on assisting states in combating human trafficking together with law enforcement, prosecutors, social services, civil society and legislatures in Italy, in Malta, Iceland and Spain, to mention but a few. In total, we implemented activities to combat human trafficking in 36 participating states in 2024 to address regional security challenges that require cross-border coherence and collaboration. In the Conflict Prevention Centre, we play a support role to our field missions and activities, including our support programme for Ukraine, the SPU. We work closely together with field missions in support of our 2 flagship programs in Central Asia, the Border Management Staff College in Dushanbe and the OSCE Academy in Bishkek. In Vienna, we support the Forum for Security Cooperation with expert advisors and provide political and coordination advice to the thematic departments. The CPC also supports the Chair in Office, the Secretary General, participating states and executive structures in the areas of early warning, early action and crisis response. We have an early warning focal point network which facilitates the identification of emerging tensions or conflicts and conducts crisis simulation exercises for all field operations. We maintain a rapidly deployable strategic asset reserve that enhances the OSCE's ability to address crises. We manage or coordinate a number of projects that are implemented in multiple places. For example, the Regional Trial Monitoring Project in Southeastern Europe, covering around 300 serious corruption and organised crime cases across 6 jurisdictions. We coordinate the repository programme designed to respond to the implications of instability in Afghanistan, an envelope of some 35 projects across all 3 dimensions, mostly implemented in the Central Asia participating states. We manage the Secretariat's support programme for Ukraine, which delivers on 20 projects in all 3 dimensions, building with around 27, 28 local partners, building democratic and social resilience in Ukraine in the long term and addressing the immediate consequences of the war in the short term. Since I know that many of you will have just returned from Ukraine, I will return also to that in a moment. We are staunch supporters of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas. For example, we manage a cross-regional youth dialogue project, which brings together young people from Central Asia and from the South Caucasus to learn about the OSCE and the value of multilateral diplomacy. We run the OSCE Scholarship for Peace and Security, which annually brings together around 150 young professionals from across the OSCE area and beyond, empowering them to engage in conflict prevention and resolution. Importantly, we also support the formal conflict-related formats and dialogue facilitation in the field. In Moldova, we support conflict resolution efforts by the OSCE mission in Moldova and the special representative for the Transnistrian settlement process. In Georgia, dealing with the consequences of the 2008 armed conflict, our staff support the efforts of the chairperson in office's special representative in his function as the co-chair of the Geneva International Discussions and as co-facilitator of the Incident Prevention and Response Mechanism, the IPRM. We are also closely observing the political process between Armenia and Azerbaijan and keep up a strong political engagement. Building on the decades-long experience of OSCE in this context, we stand ready to increase our support to the sides as they strive for normalizing relations and making peace. Through our mediation support team, we ensure that our staff in the field, particularly in places where conflict still frames public and political discourse, for example, in Serbia, Kosovo, or Bosnia and Herzegovina, these places are places where we keep our staff up to date and well equipped to deal with mediation and negotiation skills. Via the OSCE Communications Network and under the auspices of measures such as the Open Skies Treaty, the Vienna Document and Dayton Article 4, CPC continues to facilitate the secure exchange of diplomatic notification around military information. In 2024, complementing our existing work in Southeastern Europe, we also worked on reducing the risks of illicit trafficking and uncontrolled spread of salva, ammunition, and explosives to and from Central Asia, stemming from the instability in Afghanistan. Such illicit trafficking could undermine the safety, security, and stability of societies in the region and beyond. To this end, we implemented 7 projects in close cooperation with the Border Security Management and Customs authorities, as well as the respective ministries of defense of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. And indeed, just last week, we completed the removal of more than 50 tons of toxic rocket fuel samin from Kyrgyzstan that was incinerated at a disposal facility in Germany. Let me return to Ukraine. I am pleased that during your visit, you were able to meet with my SPU colleagues and to hear from them firsthand how the programme aims to mitigate the consequences of the war in the short term, but build democratic, institutional and societal resilience in the longer term. Again, we do this right across the comprehensive security spectrum. Thus, in the human dimension, we have work on enhancing the investigative capacity of the Ministry of Internal Affairs so that it can optimize its efforts on persons missing during the war and due to the war, including children. We also saw the National Social Service of Ukraine adopt SPU-developed online toolkit to assist children affected by the war. In the economic and environmental dimension, we built capacity on humanitarian demining, resulting in Ukraine's demining national strategy. And we bought specialized software to enable Ukraine investigate financial crime committed using cryptocurrencies, getting back more than 15 million for Ukraine's budget. The SPU supported the development and upgrade of the administrative reporting software, which collects statistical data in the anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, enabling national authorities to more effectively address money laundering and the financing of terrorism threats. In the political-military dimension, SPU ensured that the State Emergency Services of Ukraine now uses standard operating procedures based on international standards to respond to chemical threats. And there is much more demand for our programming from our national partners than we can currently match. This is what we are able to do programmatically, but we stand ready to offer our support in case of need in the context of any agreed settlement that may end the war. Be this through monitoring, dialogue facilitation, facilitating safe passage for those repairing local civilian infrastructure or other matters. We maintain a state of readiness. We have the tools, we have the expertise and the experience to engage, should we be so mandated by the 57 to do. Delegates, I cannot speak about Ukraine without mentioning the plight of the 3 OSCE officials in detention, Vadim Golda, Maxim Petrov, and Dmitro Shabanov. They have been in detention far from their loved ones for over 1,000 days now. While we continue to advocate and call for their immediate release, both in public, like here, and privately, I want to thank you for your meeting with the families last week in Kiev. We must work together to pursue every avenue so that they can come home safely to their loved ones. Thank you. From promoting comprehensive security to fostering dialogue, cooperation, and conflict resolution, the OSCE remains steadfast in its commitment to ensuring the safety, stability, and well-being of over 1 billion people across its vast area of operation that stretches from Vancouver to Vladivostok. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive overview and for your great efforts. Dear colleagues, we are now moving to our special debate session, which will be focused on nuclear security, escalation risks, and the protection of critical infrastructure in times of conflict, particularly in light of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Nuclear security and the protection of critical infrastructure have become increasingly pressing concerns in today's volatile security landscape. The ongoing military activity near Ukraine's nuclear power plants present an unprecedented risk, with several facilities having come under direct threat. Just last week, a Russian drone struck the former nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, creating a risk of radioactive substances being released from old shelter facilities. This situation raised serious concerns about the potential consequences for regional and global stability. Never before has a conflict unfolded in such close proximity to multiple major nuclear installations, significantly elevating the danger. Today's special debate will focus on these critical issues, exploring the risks of nuclear escalation and the urgent need to safeguard critical infrastructure during conflict. We are honored to have Ambassador Tibor Tut, Executive Secretary Emeritus of the Preparatory Commission for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, introduce this timely and essential discussion. Ambassador Tut, let me thank you for the great work that you and your brave colleagues carry out on a daily basis in the Ukraine and elsewhere. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am truly honored to be here. And I would like to talk truth to power, because you are power. Let me start with disclosures. Disclosure number 1, I believe in pacta sunt servanda. Agreements we have to kept by all players at all time and in all circumstances. I believe in a fair and just end to be brought to the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation with respect of the UN Charter provisions and principles and the Helsinki Final Act principles. I would like to disclose as well that I am coming to these issues from the community of those who are doing nuclear safety, security, safeguards, test ban, non-proliferation, and export control. So I am biased. While being biased, I truly believe that we have to make 2 steps back from this narrow issue. Otherwise, we will not be able to put our arms around it. And in that respect, I would like to recall an image The image is the following. Imagine you are in 1907 in The Hague. You are the delegates to the Hague Convention, which set in place the rules of the law. In 1899, they started with preserving peace. In 1907, they ended up with the Hague Convention. They wanted to reconvene in 1914. It did not happen. In 10 years after 1907, the patient after this diplomatic operation was dead. And not just the patient was dead, and not just the tragic death of 100 million people in World War I and World War II followed. But what happened? Their empires, 4 empires came down in less than a decade. And 2 more empires were put in the emergency room for resuscitation. So I would like to keep this image in our mind to judge whether we have the right situation awareness, whether our perceptions are up to the moment, and whether the highest level of quality, this is human agency, being individual or collective, is really summoned by us at the right moment. I would like to recall something else as well. Imagine that we are standing on a beach, ocean beach, and we are collecting empty shells, and we are going deeper and deeper into this exercise. And then imagine that this beach is Phuket, and this is 2004, 26th of December. And what is coming with 1,000 kilometer speed is a tsunami, which is a 10-meter high tsunami. And if we are not listening to what was the case on that day on a particular beach, to the voice of a small girl who was 10 years old, then her parents and those 100 tourists who moved to the higher ground would have not escaped that tsunami. So keep in mind these 2 images, and let me describe what I call a transition ahead of us, and it's a tsunami transition in my judgment. And I will try to explain, first of all, why don't we pull all the dots of ups and downs of economic, security, social, and cultural development since the late 1980s, not independent, discrete events, but as a holistic continuum. And why don't we perceive it as it is something like a transition from one industrial technological era, the second one, to the third one. And this is probably a longer process. This is not for 2 decades, but probably potentially it's for more generations from now onwards. And why don't we try to look for something which could be similar? If you ask me, I would find 1890, 1950, yes, 60 years for a similar transition. And if we scratch the surface of that period, what we see is 12 recessions, 1 huge depression, 2 wars which were not 2 separate wars, but they were a continuum of war with 1 long armistice in between those 2 wars, and uprising and upheavals and civil wars, left and right radical ideas, communist, fascist, Nazis, and barbarism on a massive scale. So this is what was a similar transitional period, if this analogy works. Of course, historians would say, this is history. It is history, stupid. I take that point. Or politicians might say, it's hot air. I can respect that viewpoint as well. But what we will have to do is to imagine that we are potentially on this beach on the 26th of December 2004, and we have to decide whether we listen to someone above whom we have authority, the parents, or not. And let me make the following point. In case this scenario, which is one of the futures are realized, is a pertinent one, then we have to think through, are we really having the right perception compared even to the second degenerated transition in between 1890 and 1950? Why? Because we have at least two more complicating factors. Factor number one, climate change. So this transition, which degenerated in the period I described, is further complicated, not mathematically, but geometrically complicated by climate change. I don't have the time to go into that. And the second one, artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, singularity, alignment between human and machine, and the whole notion of intelligent coexistence. Why it is important? Because, again, this is a phenomenon we have not seen. And this phenomenon is requiring that we reassess the situation. We reassess the situation because in just less than 2 years, the level reached by these tools are at the PhD level, which is representing 2% of our societies, 2% of our societies. Question, do we take seriously as an option that there might be a tsunami, probably 5 minutes away from us? Do we try to move to a higher ground? Because we cannot stop that tsunami, but we can move to a higher ground. We can grab water and we can get a tool, a phone with GPS and with all the situation awareness tools which we would need in a situation like that. We can try to tame the tsunami impact by moving to a higher ground and to tame the transition. And we have to be aware, and the notion of this introduction is about the nuclear aspect. In addition to this triple transition I am describing to you, we have the nuclear issue which is underlying everything. We have 20,000 more warheads than it used to be in 1910. And one of them might be at half power, more powerful by 1 order of magnitude than all the destructive power of World War I and World War II weapons, all taken together, expressed in TNT, and one particular weapon at half power might be more powerful. In addition to that, if it is not enough for us, and I know that you will switch off right away, but I will have to repeat it, and you can switch off, but it's recorded. We have 200,000 worth of plutonium and uranium in military and in civilian custody. 200,000, 10 times of the number of warheads. If it is not enough, we have another 200,000 tons, metric tons, not kilos, 200,000 metric tons of spent fuels stored next to the nuclear installations. These are peaceful nuclear installations. It's waiting there as sitting duck. If it is not enough still, then I have to call our attention that in addition to the 400 nuclear facilities, sitting ducks, as we hear from the presentations, we have chemical and nuclear peaceful facilities, which are containing under the regulations, it's called dangerous forces, which shouldn't be released by customary law, but they are sitting ducks. But to handle all this question, we have to step back, and you have to step back, and you have to make sure that we understand where we would like to go, whether we would like to listen to this voice, even if we have authority over that voice. This time is different in my judgment in terms of opportunities as well. AI is making different. Imagine AI as a train pulling out of the stations. Those who are sitting on that train might have, in case the train is not derailed, in case the train is kept on its track, they might have a better future in front of them. Of course, it's subject to the alignment issue, it's subject to the intelligent coexistence between human and machine. But let me make this point. Could it be that those who are investing right now $1 billion per day, $1 billion per year into trying to grab land, people, and resources are misinvesting money, and they are doing a crime against themselves. Why? Because this money would be needed to buy the ticket to this train. There might be no second train. There might be a situation where those who did not join the train on time might have to walk after the train. And this train is very fast. Yesterday, I came across a tweet by Ethan Mollick, who published a bestseller, Intelligent Coexistence, and he said, there is no one probably, or very few, who are following events on AI as closely as I am. And I cannot put my arms anymore around what's going on. Is there anyone who can do it? So this is this fast, this train is this fast. And in the future, great power status will not be measured in how many hundreds of thousands of square kilometers you can add to your country. It will not be measured in how many millions of people you can add to your population. Why? Because great power status will be measured not in square kilometers, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, but it will be measured how many thousand AI agents, I dare to use this word agent, AI agents you will deploy in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, or 6 months. And this is the time frame. I hope that those who will have to think through again the situation awareness issue, we have to think that there is no demography doomsday scenario, because some of these tools which are in front of us can be used and deployed on a massive scale, where millions of AI agents can be deployed to take care of things. So those who are having a declining population, and in many countries it is the situation, I think we have to rethink it. And we have to rethink it whether we choose to stay on the beach and picking up shells and the tsunami is coming, or we would like to move to higher ground. My modest proposal, and it's very modest, and I might need just 2 minutes to finish, a modest tool for that walk to a higher ground. I would recommend that you give an idea, a thought to creating something which exists for climate change and which exists in a different way for artificial intelligence. It's called for climate change IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think there is a need to create not necessarily intergovernmental, but an international or interparliamentary panel on the transition. You can give a better name. I describe what I mean by transition. A transition which is tenable transition. And I think is doable in a way that, yes, it will bring together not necessarily the 3,000 scientists who are working on climate change, but with new tools of LLM and AI, yes, one can collect the wisdom. One can troll the literature which is existing. The literature which is existing related to this issue ignored by all of us. And we can put it together and we can measure, model, and try to mitigate this mapping leading to a higher ground. And it can be done tomorrow because the tools are waiting, the applications are waiting for new users. And if millions of computers can be used for digging Bitcoin, then I hope that 10% of those computers can be diverted and do that. OSCE should play, and parliamentarians should have a leading role, not to repeat 1907. You do not want to be captured by a photo looking into the camera like in 1907 those delegates were looking, because it will be difficult to explain to the next generation what we have been doing here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Dear colleagues, with this introduction, we will proceed with our open debate. We are about to close the speakers list now. So if you have any last minute requests, please approach our procedural advisor. I can see that a large number of committee members have asked to speak. We have only limited time available, so speaking time will be limited to 2 minutes for each intervention. I call first Mr. Nikita Porturaev from Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, dear friends, I understand, of course, that you probably have a lot of questions to Ukrainian delegation, so that's why I had to change a little my statement. Amid the turbulence of recent days, Ukraine remains steadfast, calm in resolve, unwavering in its determination to defend itself. We have no illusions about the changes ahead, but neither do we have doubts about our strength or the commitment of our partners. We believe in values and principles, and we know that for the vast majority of OSCE member states, these values remain non-negotiable. But even if we were to approach international relations from a purely pragmatic standpoint, we must rely on common sense. And common sense dictates that aggression must face consequences, and security must never be bargained away to appease those who seek to dismantle it. Dear friends, Ukraine stands firm in its position. Our fight is not just for territorial integrity. It is for fundamental principles that underpin the international order. We are grateful to those who understand that defending this principle is a shared responsibility, one that demands not just words, but concrete actions. And of course, a few words about nuclear security. I don't want to spend too much time discussing the obvious. Nuclear security is in grave danger. Russia disregards all rules and restrictions. Russia is blackmailing the entire world with a nuclear threat that it itself recklessly escalates. But this is no reason to fear Russia, colleagues, because when a madman attacks people with a knife, we don't not cower in fear. We neutralize him. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. I call now Dr. Daniela de Rieder, Vice President of our Assembly. Daniela, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, liebe Berichterstatterinnen, für das Wort. Vielen Dank für Ihre Beiträge. Sie haben deutlich gemacht, dass im Jubiläumsjahr des 50-jährigen Bestehens der Helsinki-Schlussakte unsere Sicherheitsarchitektur unter tektonischen Veränderungen großen Ausmaßes leidet. Ja, Sie haben deutlich gemacht, es geht um unsere Werte und Prinzipien, die wir verteidigen müssen. Und Sie haben uns daran erinnert, dass der OSZE-Raum größer ist als die Europäische Union. Mit Blick auf Aserbaidschan, Armenien, die Türkei, Zentralasien oder auch Kanada und Partnerländer wie Israel, Palästina oder auch die Maghreb-Staaten. Und ich freue mich, dass wir hier heute auch eine marokkanische Delegation zu Gast haben. Ich will aber deutlich machen, wir alle wollen gute Beziehungen nach Washington. Ich kann aber nicht leugnen, dass ich seit der Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz hochgradig irritiert bin. Lassen Sie mich deshalb an die Adresse der Herren Trump, Vance und Musk sagen, die Ukraine sollte niemals einem Diktatfrieden unterliegen. Nein, es ist nicht die ukrainische Provokation, die Kinder getötet und entführt hat, die Frauen vergewaltigt hat, die Infrastrukturen, kritische Infrastrukturen zerstört hat. Es ist der Grund für dieses Massaker ist der russische Angriffskrieg. Und dabei sollte es auch bleiben bei unserer Souveränität, denn die Ukraine verteidigt auch unsere Freiheit, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Und zweitens will ich deutlich machen, auch Grönland beziehungsweise Dänemark und Kanada wollen nicht annektiert oder kolonialisiert werden. Gleiches gilt für den Panama-Kanal. Unsere Waffe, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ist das Wort, das direkte Gespräch und nicht nur der Social-Media-Kanal. Nutzen wir dieses heute und lassen mich am Ende sagen, ich habe Hoffnung, dank der Botschafter Valdez und Botschafter Kamp. Sie haben die Resolution 1325 angesprochen. Das macht mir Hoffnung auf eine bessere, auch gendergerechte Welt. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Daniela. I call now from Canada, Honorable Dr. Heidi Fry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to address the issue of nuclear war and the threat of nuclear war that is happening right now. We are about 90 minutes to midnight in terms of the doomsday clock. 90 seconds, sorry, to midnight. That means that if we do have a nuclear war, and we know that if one person has a first strike, somebody is going to retaliate, and that becomes a nuclear war. That is an existential threat to this planet. We will not be able to survive. Humanity will not, nor will the planet itself. Physicians against nuclear war will call this the worst pandemic the world will ever see. So we need to prevent it from happening. How do we do that? We see the United Nations has a very clear sense that there should be no nuclear war, there should be no strike. We know that the Helsinki talks about people taking a first strike against other people. We said in Vancouver in 2023 that we will end nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear war, yet Russia continues to escalate its blackmail, as Mikisa said, about nuclear threats to every one of the countries around us here. And we need to decide what we're going to do about it. We talk about it, we say great things, we say how terrible it's going to be, we create declarations, but we have done nothing. The threat is getting worse. What are we going to do? I would like to hear us talk about some concrete steps. A, to stop a first strike. B, to decrease nuclear stockpiles around here, and we know that Russia has one of the largest stockpiles in the world. What are we going to do about this? It's going to be too late when the tsunami arrives. This is not about getting to higher ground. There is no ground to go to. So I would like to hear some concrete discussion on what we do to prevent nuclear war right now. We're closer to it than we've ever been.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fry. I call now Ms. Lilith Minassian from Armenia.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, Armenia is committed to a foreign policy that prioritizes peace, cooperation, and the strengthening of our sovereignty and democracy. In this context, addressing closed borders and advancing peace with Azerbaijan are key pillars of our efforts to build a more secure and interconnected region. Last year, Armenia and Azerbaijan signed a protocol on the joint activities of the commissions on the delimitation of the state border between the two countries, basing the delimitation process on the Alma-Ata Declaration. The Constitutional Court of Armenia has confirmed that this decision fully complies with our constitution. The protocol was ratified by the Parliament of Armenia and the President of Azerbaijan, and it represents the first interstate document between Armenia and Azerbaijan. A finalized peace treaty with Azerbaijan will be a historic achievement. Out of 70 points in the draft peace treaty, we have reached full agreement on 15. We presented constructive suggestions on the remaining 2 points and looking forward to the positive response from the Azerbaijani side. It will not only transform the relations between our two countries, but also unlock new opportunities for regional cooperation in trade, transport, and energy. However, as we make progress in peace negotiations, we believe that the opening of borders will become a natural guarantee of a lasting peace. Furthermore, the Republic of Armenia has submitted a written proposal to Azerbaijan on providing railway transportation from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan and internationally through the territory of Armenia, and from Armenia to Armenia and internationally through the territory of Azerbaijan, and is waiting Azerbaijan's positive response. Last but not least, let me reiterate Armenia's commitment to peace, stability, and regional cooperation. Together we can build a future where borders are crossroads, where conflicts are resolved through dialogue, and where the people of our region can thrive in peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker for 2 minutes, Mr. Matti Raidma, Head of Delegation from Estonia.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, nuclear security is becoming one of the most crucial topics in our region, but I would like to address energy critical infrastructure, which is currently under serious threat because of Russian aggressive policy. There have been numerous acts of sabotage and attacks on infrastructure in Baltic Sea, affecting directly Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Latvia, and Estonia. We are under constant act of hybrid violation from Moscow. Protection of undersea infrastructure is a relatively new topic and has to be more addressed in international regulations, especially in IMO. However, it does not compare to the reality in Ukraine. In the past weeks and months, Russia has started more aggressively to attack nuclear facilities, but additionally to electrical, also Ukraine's gas infrastructure. There are brutal attacks on the energy security in Ukraine in the middle of winter. This crucial moment for Europe, we need to show solidarity with Ukraine and continue to strengthen support to them right now with all means necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Ms. Farah Karimi, Head of Delegation from the Netherlands, to be followed by Ms. Gaya Mamadov from Azerbaijan.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, on behalf of Dutch delegation, which consists of members from a broad political spectrum, I address you at a crucial moment in history. Our history. Sometimes decades pass without major changes, and sometimes history shifts in just a few days. The latter is happening now. Our democracy and values are under pressure. Those currently in power in the United States of America are not only on the verge of betraying Ukraine, but is also attempting to weaken Europe as a whole. Europe must be prepared to act on its own. It is not Washington, but it is us who determine our future. We remain steadfast in supporting a free and independent Ukraine, which is crucial for our security and prosperity. We must not reward the aggressor and must uphold international law. Every day, Ukrainian men and women fight and die for their freedom and for ours. On the front lines, thousands of soldiers are killed, while innocent civilians perish. Families are buried under rubble, and children are abducted to Russia. On the other side of the battlefield, an average of 1,500 Russian soldiers die each day to fulfill dictator Putin's imperialist dream. For 3 years, the suffering has been indescribable. Ukraine cannot be decided upon without Ukraine. Europe cannot be decided upon without Europe. Our values, security and prosperity must not fall prey to brute power politics. Only through unity and determination can Europe remain strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Mr. Gaya Mamadov, followed by Mr. Angelos Syrigos. Mr. Mamadov, Head of Delegation from Azerbaijan.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by paying tribute to the victims of the Khojaly massacre occurred around this time 33 years ago when Armenia massacred over 600 Azerbaijani civilians. Today, we find solace in seeing that some of the perpetrators have been brought before court of justice and that Khojaly survivors can finally return to their homes after nearly 30 years of occupation. Azerbaijan's liberation of its territories stands as a rare example of restoring justice and opens way for lasting peace in the region. Yes, challenges persist. Armenia says it wants to sign a peace document, but we won't achieve real peace. We have some serious concerns regarding Armenia's rapid and massive armament, its failure to fulfill its obligation on unimpeded transit, and its obstruction of return of Azerbaijanis expelled from Armenia. These underscore why peace requires just more than words on a paper. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank speakers for their today's presentations. The OSCE indeed remains an important mechanism for European security, yet it must address its flaws and past failures. There shall be no place for double standards, selective application of international law, and misusing human rights for political purposes. In an increasingly globalized world, we must acknowledge limits of regional security structures in terms of conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and arms control. Regarding today's special debate, it must be reiterated that NPT remains the cornerstone of international security, provided that all three pillars, nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful use, are upheld equally and consistently. Thank you.
Thank you. Call now Mr. Nicholas Sankaradze from Georgia.
Thank you, Chair. I have to bring back your attention to item number 3. I was listening very carefully to the rapporteur, and I must say that I'm surprised and I'm very concerned. When speaking about Russian aggression and occupation, Georgia was not mentioned. And when speaking about situation in Georgia, the Russian occupation was not mentioned at all. While I agree that political polarization is a challenge to Georgia's democracy, it's not a major threat. Major threat is Russian occupation of 20% of our territory, and also 8% of our population, which is kicked out from their homes. I must remind you that Georgia, together with Ukraine, are the only states where Russia occupied large parts of the sovereign soils. And I also have to remind you that OSCE is one of the co-chairs of the Geneva International Discussions on conflict between Georgia and Russia. Given the fact that in the last 17 years there has been no progress on Geneva International Discussions, doesn't mean that we have to put the issue aside and not mention it at all. I also remind the audience that Russian occupation started not in 2014, but in 2008, and Georgia was the first victim of Russian aggression. I hope that this was an unfortunate omission, and I urge the rapporteur to include Russian occupation of Georgia into the upcoming report, and I'm happy to work with you on these paragraphs. In this light, let me also inform you that last Saturday, so-called presidential elections were held in Russian-occupied Abkhazia, with polling stations opened on the territory of Russian Federation itself. And I want to call on OSCE and all the member states to condemn these sham elections as they are held in contravention of the international law. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I call now Mr. Angelos Sirikos from Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are addressing an issue of critical importance to global security: the dual risks posed by nuclear weapons in times of conflict and the vulnerability of nuclear power plants during war. Despite understanding the catastrophic dangers of nuclear weapons, states continue to possess them. Why? Deterrence, the belief that having them prevents war. Yet, this logic traps us in a cycle of fear, where a single miscalculation could lead to disaster. The war in Ukraine has repeatedly raised concerns about the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons, smaller battlefield-specific nuclear arms on behalf of Russia. The deliberate or accidental use of such weapons would result in unimaginable destruction, not only from the initial explosion, but also from long-term radiation consequences. Let me now turn to the issue of nuclear power plants in times of war. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has tragically exposed the vulnerabilities of these facilities. Consider two alarming cases. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been hit by drone strikes, suffered power line losses, and experienced a fire that significantly damaged one of its cooling towers. And the second case is the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, once the site of the 1986 disaster, which has also been targeted. Its protective shield, built to contain radiation, has recently attacked, risking further contamination. These incidents illustrate how nuclear power plants can become military targets, exposing entire regions to the threat of catastrophic radiation leaks, environmental devastation, and long-term health hazards. The risk of nuclear disaster demands stronger international governance, transparency, and security measures. The role of the International Atomic Energy Agency is crucial in monitoring and safeguarding nuclear materials worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call now Representative Mark Visi, will be followed by Pere Ioan Pons from Spain.
Thank you. I know that right now there's a lot of uncertainty and that this body is in high anxiety. But I want to assure everyone that the United States delegation to OSCE remains steadfast to freedom, remains steadfast to Europe, and the U.S. delegation remains steadfast to maintaining and protecting the freedom of Ukraine. And despite policy debates and political transitions, the United States delegation remains unwavering in its support for Ukraine's victory and a just and lasting peace. Putin, who can be trusted by no one, has repeatedly broken agreements and shown that diplomacy to him is merely a tool of war. A lasting peace cannot be a temporary ceasefire that allows Russia to rebuild its military and strike again. And we must remain firm and stand against anything that rewards his aggression. I want everyone in here to know that there are those of us that are members of this body from the U.S. that understand very well that Ukraine is not Putin's final target. His ambitions are rooted in a broader effort to resurrect the Russian Empire, threatening the security of all of Europe. If he is not stopped in Ukraine, his aggression will not end there. I want to congratulate the Ukrainian people. They really have demonstrated a great deal of courage, fighting not just for their land, but for the liberation of their fellow Ukrainians from life under Russian occupation. Their resistance sends a clear message that authoritarianism cannot and will not triumph over freedom. Failure to support Ukraine would only embolden Russia and every other authoritarian regime watching closely. The free world must remain resolute, and sustained support for Ukraine is not just a moral imperative, but a strategic necessity for global stability and security. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you, Representative. I call now Mr. Pedro Joan Pons from Spain, Vice Chair of our Assembly, and will be followed by Mr. Damdin from Mongolia.
Muchísimas gracias, presidente. En primer lugar, hace precisamente 3 años estábamos aquí con nuestros compañeros y compañeras ucranianos, dándoles apoyo en el momento trágico de la agresión, del primer día de agresión rusa. Y por tanto me gustaría darles todo el apoyo otra vez y decir que es más que nunca el tiempo de la unidad de esta asamblea. Es lo más importante y me congratulo enormemente por lo que ha dicho ahora mismo el representante de los Estados Unidos de América. Realmente ha sido una gran intervención. En segundo lugar, me gustaría decir que ayer Mario Draghi hizo una intervención importante en Bruselas y la tiñó de optimismo. Me gustaría sobre todo decir que esta organización tiene que ser optimista y que además creemos que tenemos que estar en la mesa de la solución que se produzca para Ucrania y para muchos de los conflictos en esta región. También me gustaría decir que es necesario más que nunca promover el diálogo con todos, con todas las situaciones graves en Georgia y sobre todo también ahora recientemente en Rumanía. Es más que nunca importante preservar la democracia ante la desinformación, que es el gran cáncer de este momento actual. Y por supuesto, un gran apoyo a la presidencia finlandesa que reivindicaba el otro día que es el año del momento Helsinki. Efectivamente, más que nunca ante este tsunami que decía el señor Toth, más que nunca hay que preservar la democracia para poder preservar las libertades y los derechos humanos. Ya termino diciendo que es más importante que nunca estar cerca de las poblaciones, estar cerca de las observaciones electorales y me gustaría terminar también citando al embajador de España que ha hablado de la importancia de la mujer en las decisiones y en los puestos importantes. Y por tanto, nosotros como delegación apoyaremos al máximo que haya la mayor paridad posible en esta organización y en todas las organizaciones. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Pere. I call now Mr. Sotbater Damdin from Mongolia, followed by Mr. Alexander Stokebo from Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mongolia, I would like to say a few remarks about the nuclear security issue which was raised in our session today. Well, Mongolia is a country that proclaimed its territory as nuclear weapon-free zone. And we did it exactly, at the very early stage of post-Cold War period. In other words, at the early stage of post-Cold War, people really forgot actually about this risk of nuclear weapon, and everybody was so romantic and optimistic. But yet, at that time, we were raising that once the weapons are there, this risk is there, and after Rarotonga and Tlatelolco, Mongolia was the 3rd country to raise this issue, and later on it was supported by Kazakhstan and Thailand. And in this context, what I want to say is that more and more countries should be coming up with this idea of nuclear weapon-free zone. And this should be noted here in this context, I believe. Also, when we're talking about nuclear weapon security and risks, we should be capitalizing on what already exists. So one of the important latest documents is joint communique that was issued on January 3rd, 2022 by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. And this joint communique was on impossibility of nuclear cataclysm and war. What I believe is that not only 5 permanent members of the Security Council should be part of it, but all the countries having nuclear technologies should be joining the spirit of this communique, and that would be a very important also step in terms of securing the world. Also, I would like to take note of the U.S. new administration's recent appeal addressed to two nuclear powers on reducing nuclear expenditure. This was a very pragmatic proposal, and this should not be extending only to two other nuclear powers, but it should be extended to, and many other nuclear countries should be joining this appeal and supporting this. Now, this year we're commemorating 50th anniversary of the United Nations, and United Nations Charter is one of the fundamental international law sources. And if we're talking about rule of law based system, then the core of this rule of law-based system is the UN Charter.
Try to conclude, please.
Yeah, and we're not sufficiently talking about this. And also, we're not sufficiently talking about preventive diplomacy. And therefore, we should be revisiting all of these existing, institutions that are designed to prevent this sort of cataclysms. Thank you.
Thank you. I call now Mr. Alexander Stochebo from Norway, followed by Mr. Sergei Rachkov from Belarus.
Mr. Chair, 50 years ago, we agreed on common norms to live up to the Helsinki Charter and to hold each other to account. Today, this is more important than ever. Norway is fully committed to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and we firmly believe that Ukraine and Europe must be involved in any negotiations to achieve a just and lasting peace. The outcome of the war will have long-lasting effects on European and transatlantic security. Hence, our priority should be to strengthen Ukraine, to bolster our support, and to give Ukraine strong security guarantees. Friends, Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine constitute a great risk also for nuclear safety. We saw this again last weekend in Chernobyl. Acts of sabotage, cable cuts, and other disruptions signal that we are moving up the conflict spectrum. Against this backdrop, it is more important than ever to strengthen cooperation on energy security and protection of critical infrastructure. Naturally, this was the topic when the Young Parliamentarians Network met in the Norwegian energy capital, Stavanger. Friends, as we mark 50 years of the OSCE, parliamentary diplomacy is needed now more than ever. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Call now Mr. Sergei Rachkov from Belarus, followed by Mr. Kyriakos Hagiani from Cyprus.
Уважаемые члены Ассамблеи, в рамках дебатов нашего комитета по пункту 3 повестки хотел бы предложить видение белорусской стороны причин беспрецедентного кризиса безопасности на пространстве ОБСЕ. Если коротко, это пренебрежение взаимозависимостью, честными компромиссами и учетом интересов безопасности друг друга, а также отход от реалистичного взгляда на существование сфер интересов и влияния. Несмотря на общую конфронтационность атмосферы в ОБСЕ и ее структурах в последние годы, нам всем придется сфокусироваться на ключевых вопросах, если нам не безразлична судьба нашей организации, если мы хотим отвести регион от последней черты, к которой он все ближе. Беларусь никогда не несла угрозу никому из своих соседей. Однако беспрецедентные односторонние принудительные меры стран Запада против Беларуси, безоглядное расширение пространства НАТО, наращивание военного потенциала и активизация военных учений у наших границ – все это заставляет нас быть прагматиками в оценке этих угроз. Тем более мы не приемлем попытки, в том числе под прикрытием ОБСЕ, диктовать нам, с кем дружить и каких лидеров выбирать. Наша делегация отвергает оценки ситуации в Беларуси, прозвучавшие в выступлениях, как не соответствующие реальному положению.
Мы последовательно и прозрачно для международного сообщества предпринимаем вынужденные ответные меры по укреплению собственной безопасности. Также последовательно мы стремимся вносить вклад в региональную безопасность. Уже второй год подряд Минск принял международную конференцию по евразийской безопасности, продемонстрировал, что мы способны создавать условия для выработки принципов нашего мирного сосуществования как в Европе, так и в Евразии. Столь же ответственно мы подошли к организации конференции по нелегальной миграции в Минске, пригласив в том числе и всех наших соседей. Их самоустранение от предложенного диалога говорит само за себя. Более того, сохраняя дух Хельсинки и дух Сан-Франциско, мы продолжили развивать инициативу Евразийской хартии многообразия и многополярности в 21 веке. Беларусь видит этот документ всесторонним, не противоречащим уставу ООН, чтобы способствовать формированию глобального консенсуса в сфере безопасности. И в нем должны быть изложены принципы, на которых все государства готовы строить в последующем мирный порядок. Для предложений и дискуссий мы открыты. Мы не должны забывать, что в этом году отмечается 80-летие Великой Победы над нацизмом, что придает особое значение объединительной повестке в ОБСЕ и нашим совместным усилиям по преодолению вызовов современности. Благодарю вас.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus, followed by Mr. Mirdar Samikozo from Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to congratulate the rapporteur for his comprehensive view of the security situation in the OSCE area. I would also like to thank him for his report on the risk of a war breaking out in Cyprus. Dear colleagues, the issues of nuclear safety and the security of critical infrastructure in times of conflicts lie at the very center of international security. The concerning nuclear rhetoric expressed since Russian invasion to Ukraine serves as a reminder that nuclear escalation cannot be excluded. Moreover, the vulnerability of the region around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant continue to bear the danger of disastrous consequences while being in total disregard of OSCE principles and commitments. We must urgently call yet one against that the safety requirements as set by the International Atomic Energy Agency in this matter are adhered to by all sides to the conflict. The erosion of confidence in nuclear proliferation agreements and the increasingly nuclear rhetoric among global leaders is a fundamental issue. In the context of the rising geopolitical tensions, agreement and international instruments are particularly relevant and must be respected by all OSCE participating states. We very much hope that the OSCE can be used as a forum to facilitate discussion on new nuclear disarmament treaties. Equally concerning the Middle East unresolved conflicts, Iran's nuclear program remains a source of concern. Iran must move fast to satisfy the request of the International Atomic Energy Agency and ensure that its program is exclusively peaceful in nature. Transparency and collaboration with the IAEA are required to prevent a new nuclear crisis in the Middle East. If Iran proceeds with its nuclear program as it deems appropriated, that is, to create conditions for imposing an extreme Islamic regime while simultaneously threatening to destroy the state of Israel, this will mean a permanent legitimization of the defense strategies of neighboring states. Finally, I'm concerned about Turkey's revisionist policy towards its neighboring countries, especially Cyprus, Greece, and Syria. Turkey must prove that it does not seek territory or impose itself on its neighboring countries. All of Turkey's policies demonstrate revisionism through violence and force. We, as legislations, need to create a protection of such facilities of nuclear facilities in conflict situation as required by international humanitarian international law and then Geneva Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Kyriakos. I call now Mr. Mirlan Samikozov from Kyrgyzstan, followed by Ms. Alexandra Ustinova from Ukraine.
Спасибо. Уважаемые председатели, уважаемые коллеги, тема нашей сегодняшней сессии очень обширная и в то же время охватывает весьма насущные направления вашей жизнедеятельности. Современные глобальные вызовы, такие как климатический кризис, угрозы продовольственной безопасности и растущее неравенство, требуют объединенных усилий международного сообщества. В такой неустойчивый период призываю все государства продолжать поддерживать парламентскую ассамблею ОБСЕ в обеспечении мира и предотвращении современных глобальных рисков и угроз. Кыргызстан выражает готовность внести свой пассивный вклад в дело поддержания мира и безопасности через эффективное миростроительство, уважение прав человека и равное участие женщин в мирных процессах, продвижение и защиту интересов развивающихся малых, а также наименее развитых стран. Уважаемые дамы и господа, сегодня я хотел бы затронуть одну из важнейших тем современности, ядерной безопасности и, в частности, остановиться на ядерной безопасности в Кыргызстане. Несмотря на то, что наша страна не является обладателем ядерного оружия, вопрос ядерной безопасности остается актуальным и требует системного подхода. Не менее значимый аспект обеспечения безопасности, защита критически важной инфраструктуры во время конфликтов – основа жизнедеятельности любого государства. Это энергетика, транспорт, водоснабжение, здравоохранение, информационные сети и другие объекты, без которых невозможно обеспечить нормальное функционирование общества. В условиях вооруженных конфликтов это объекты становятся стратегическими целями, а их разрушение или выведение из строя приводит к гуманитарным катастрофам, экономическому коллапсу и ослаблению национальной безопасности. Уважаемые коллеги, пришло время пересмотреть приоритеты глобальной безопасности. Безопасность — это не только наличных сильных армий и оружия ядерного или массового поражения. Истинная безопасность достигается через взаимное доверие, равенство и процветание для всех народов мира. Нам всем необходимо соблюдать такие принципы, как доверие, солидарность и универсальность в отношениях между государствами. Только так сообща мы сможем восстановить глобальную и региональную архитектуру безопасности. Благодарю за внимание. Спасибо.
Thank you. Instead, Ms. Alexandra Ustinova from Ukraine will speak Mr. Sergei Evstushok.
Greetings, please accept my speech about nuclear energy situation in Ukraine. Ukraine has nuclear power station and Ukraine has war. It's a great danger for Europe. We all remember incident on Chernobyl nuclear plant in 1986, only 150 kilometers to the capital of the Ukraine, Kyiv. And the consequences of this incident we continue to feel till now. On the other side, today during the Russian invasion, other sources of energy like heat stations, transformer stations, hydroelectricity stations become the main together of enemy missile and drone attacks. So without nuclear energy, Ukraine would fall in total blackout. The other danger is that in 2022, Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant was assaulted and occupied by Russian invaders. And it was the first incident in the world when a nuclear station was in a war action battlefield and continues to be under occupation till now.
and the huge risk of the nuclear accident is extremely real. The second unprecedented incident happened several days ago in February 2025 when a Russian stinking drone Shahed attacks the sarcophagus of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, creating huge risk for possible radiation leak and showing once again that Russian invaders don't disdain anything and easily put the planet under the risk of nuclear disaster. Continuing the facts about the only way for us is to develop nuclear energy sources, but with huge level of safety. Ukraine's state nuclear energy company Energoatom has plans to build the new energy blocks and Khmelnytsky nuclear plant, increasing its power capacity more than twice. Ukraine takes all the necessary measures to keep the station under control. Thank you, colleagues, for support. Let's stay united and stand together. Thank you.
Thank you. I call now Ms. Helen Samin from Belgium, followed by Mr. Thomas Port from France.
Dear colleagues, security has always been in our DNA as a party. We believe that our free way of living and our economic prosperity cannot exist without security. Therefore, we need to secure our critical and strategic infrastructure. The current geopolitical dynamic with hybrid warfare, such as cyber attacks and sabotage, has left this infrastructure very vulnerable. Europe has left its defense in the hand of NATO and the US and has done little to be self-reliant. Hopefully, the war in Ukraine can end soon, because this conflict still carries the potential for nuclear escalation. In a worst case scenario, we need to do everything in our power to prevent this conflict from escalating further. The recent drone strike on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant highlights the urgency of securing this infrastructure in a very unsettling way. All the more reason to put an end to the war as soon as possible. But our security does not stop with ending the war in Ukraine. We need to urgently invest at least of 2% of our GDP in defense and not only focus on the necessary equipment NATO asks us and on the collective defense on the eastern border. We also need to invest in securing our energy, communication and health infrastructure in our own territories. Securing our nuclear facilities should be prior in this regard. We think the EU and OSCE member states best develop a common strategy on policy because this matter stretches far beyond national borders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We must make the time limit to short the time limit to 1 minute and 30 seconds. I call now Mr. Thomas Port from France, followed by Ms. Milena Apostolaki from Greece.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. Depuis ce matin, j'entends beaucoup parler, et à plusieurs reprises, de conflits internationaux et de leur impact sur la sécurité européenne et du périmètre de l'OSCE. Il y a quelques mois de cela, je prenais la parole à Dublin déjà pour dénoncer le piétinement du droit international par le gouvernement d'extrême droite israélien. Comment penser que la sécurité européenne peut être garantie si le droit international est bafoué, piétiné, avec le silence complice des puissances occidentales comme de l'Union européenne? Comment penser que nous sommes crédibles en condamnant à juste titre la Russie pour son invasion de l'Ukraine, mais en restant silencieux sur Israël? Les doubles standards minent notre sécurité et notre capacité à agir sur la résolution des conflits. Alors que Netanyahou se voit offrir des immunités contre des mandats d'arrêt de la Cour pénale internationale, menace de bannir les représentations diplomatiques étrangères et s'engage main dans la main avec Donald Trump à faire de la bande de Gaza une nouvelle Côte d'Azur, allons-nous regarder cela en restant silencieux? À l'heure où plus d'1 million de Gazaouis sont de nouveau menacés de déportation, quels outils sont à notre disposition pour prévenir ce déplacement massif et forcé de la population de Gaza? Pour construire une paix juste et durable, il faut stopper les politiques de colonisation et d'apartheid menées par Israël et permettre la reconnaissance de l'État de Palestine et le retour de tous les réfugiés. Les mots ne suffiront pas, ils ne suffisent plus, il faudra des actes concrets. Le 31 janvier dernier, j'étais à La Haye, où a été inauguré le groupe de La Haye. 9 pays. Je cite le Belize, la Bolivie, la Colombie, Cuba, le Honduras, la Malaisie, la Namibie, le Sénégal et l'Afrique du Sud, qui s'engagent à coordonner leur action pour faire vivre le droit international et mettre fin à l'impunité d'Israël, répondre aux menaces contre la Cour pénale internationale et défendre le droit des Palestiniens. Entendez-vous résonner les noms des grands absents? Nous, les États européens. Je termine. Premiers partenaires commerciaux d'Israël, nous savons que l'embargo sur les armes, l'interdiction de naviguer dans nos ports pour les navires et le respect des mandats d'arrêt internationaux sont des outils de dissuasion puissants. Il est temps que l'OSCE intègre dans son arsenal d'outils le boycott, le désinvestissement et les sanctions contre l'État d'Israël pour lui imposer le respect du droit international. Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Milena Apostolaki from Greece, followed by Mr. Willem Junila from Finland.
Dear colleagues, the world is drastically changing and it is our responsibility to adapt to its hectic pace. We are following with great interest and concern the actions of the new leadership of the United States as they will affect us all in every aspect of our lives. We must not retreat from our fundamental and principal values which have shaped the European Union now that they are being challenged more than ever. When we discuss about nuclear security, we cannot fail to mention developments in Ukraine. 3 years after the start of the war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has showed how close a nuclear escalation can be. The danger of nuclear weapons use has been looming over Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian invasion. However, the possible use of nuclear arms in Ukraine is just one of the nuclear risks that has emerged from Russia's war. Indeed, some states might see now incentives to get their own weapons. Others might consider the use of civilian nuclear power plants as tools for terror too. All these developments are happening against the backdrop of a new nuclear arms race and the near collapse of arms control agreements. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which assesses the current state of armaments, disarmament, and international security, indicates in the published yearbook 2022 the global nuclear arsenals are expected to grow as states continue to modernize.
Try to conclude, please.
Securing nuclear facilities and critical infrastructure in times of armed conflict requires a multi-layered defense strategy, including physical security, cybersecurity, international cooperation, and advanced threat detection technologies. Due to the escalating and ever-evolving nature of threats, it is very important to leverage emerging technologies to help protect the nation's critical infrastructure. But it also requires the unity and sincere cooperation of the member states, and this should be our common goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willem Junila from Finland, followed by Mr. Kemal Çelik from Turkey.
Mr. Chair, most of us are stunned by certain statements affecting the security architecture of Europe. We have every reason to be angry. We have every reason to be offended, embarrassed, or worried. However, we must not concentrate our efforts on blaming each other, including our allies. We must be able to overcome inconsiderate and thoughtless comments or hurt feelings that accompany such statements. No words, however mean, no egos, however influential, should interfere with our ambitions to bring forward a settlement that is just for Ukraine and acceptable to the rest of us. Recent events should serve as a wake-up call for participating states. The security framework we operate in must be strengthened to stand the test of time and any upcoming threats we envision to have. I would like to underline the importance of working together. I urge all of us not to dwell in the past or social media for that matter, but look into the future, support Ukraine, and also offer our situational awareness to the United States in a good cooperating manner to find common ground and mutual understanding. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. I call now Mr. Kemal Çelik from Turkey, followed by Mr. Yurgis Klotins from Latvia.
Değerli meslektaşlarım, öncelikle Kıbrıs temsilcisi Sayın Hacıyani'nin Türkiye'ye yönelik asılsız iddialarını kabul etmemiz mümkün değildir. Türkiye barıştan yana bir ülkedir ve Kıbrıs'la ilgili tezleri de gayet açık ve nettir. Değerli meslektaşlarım, nükleer teknolojiye sahip ülkeler, silah sanayinde güçlü ülkeler kimler diye sorarsak Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nin 5 daimi üyesinin olduğu açıktır. Savaşların sebebi o ülkelere silah sağlayanların olduğu apaçık ortadayken sorunu başka yerde arıyoruz. Savaşı, çatışmayı, gerilimleri başlatanlar şimdi sorunun çözümü için öneriler sunuyorlar. Barışı sağlamaya çalışıyorlar, barış güvencini rolü oynuyorlar. Gazze'deki altyapıyı, hastaneleri, kritik tesisleri yerle bir edeceksiniz. Sonra da Gazze'yi boşaltalım, bu insanları sürgün edelim diyeceksiniz. Sanki şaka gibi bir şey. İnsanlarla, insanlıkla dalga geçiyorsunuz. Bu cesareti nereden alıyorlar? Bu cesareti ürettikleri silahlardan ve nükleer teknolojilerden alıyorlar maalesef. Ukrayna'nın altyapılarının kritik tesislerini yerle bir edeceksiniz ve buna seyirci kalacaksınız. Sonra da ben size barış getireceğim, karşılığında Ukrayna'nın madenlerini işleteceğim diyorsunuz. Trump bunu söylüyor. Bu da insanlıkla dalga geçmek değil midir? Lütfen önce bu 5 daimi üye ülke kendi kendileriyle yüzleşsinler. Önce sorunu çıkarıp sonra çözüm arama rolünü bıraksınlar. Ne diyor Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Cumhurbaşkanı Sayın Recep Tayyip Erdoğan? Dünya 5'ten büyüktür diyor ve bu gerçeği unutmayalım. Bu nedenle uluslararası toplum kritik altyapıların korunması ve nükleer güvenliğin sağlanması için ortak hareket etmek ve samimi olmak zorundadır. Saygılar sunuyorum.
Thank you. I call now Mr. Yurgis Klotins from Latvia, followed by Ms. Liliana Reis from Portugal.
Some remarks regarding OSCE unwavering support for Ukraine and the essence of principles of Helsinki Final Act. After Munich Security Conference and before the 24th of February, we must reiterate that peace, just peace, in line with international law, cannot be built at the expense of Ukraine's sovereignty and security. No peace plan that sacrifices the territorial integrity of Ukraine is permissible. OSCE must be united in understanding that any scenario in which Russia is allowed to keep the occupied territories will not be peace, but a pause before the next stage of aggression. It would only embolden aggressor to take its next steps against neighboring countries. Aggressor Putin's strategy is clear. He hopes for the weakness and lack of resilience on behalf of democratic Europe and the West. Therefore, any concession will only facilitate further aggression, not only on Ukraine, but also on other OSCE countries, Moldova, Georgia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland. Russia has not yet renounced its imperialistic policy and repented its sins. There can be no illusions. Russia understands only the language of force. Ukraine's victory is a prerequisite for European security. OSCE must support Ukrainian people with just stance in line with international law, expressed, for instance, in the Vancouver Declaration adopted 2023. We must reiterate our support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the documents of the annual session scheduled to take place in Porto in July. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much. Now Ms. Liliana Reis from Portugal, followed by Ms. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine. Pass.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, for
Ms. Liliana Reis is here.
Dear colleagues, since the end of the Cold War, we are now living in the most dangerous times with threats and risk escalation to our states and to our peoples. This escalation is accompanied by security environment deterioration. The question of multilateralism and public international law, which are our foundational bases. Now, the return of competition and withdrawal of cooperation raises questions that more than ever we must be prepared to answer. Namely, the fragility of treaties that were decisive for nuclear security and non-proliferation, such as the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. After the naivety and complacency towards the nuclear capabilities improve, particularly Russia, Iran, and North Korea, we understand now that the first factor of deterrence and containment is nuclear power. For liberal democracies, their development was never been about competition with their allies or confrontation with their enemies, but about adding power to the former to avoid the war that the latter could wage against us. And above all, ensure our democratic values and the rule of law. Some states can only stop the threat through nuclear deterrence. If we look to Ukraine, which has been victim of Russian aggression for almost 3 years after Minsk agreements and Budapest Memorandum, we perceive that there are no values without power. And for free world, we must be united and improve all of our capabilities.
Thank you. Call now Ms. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Sarkis Kanadayan from Armenia.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, we are meeting here after the Munich Security Conference at a time when the world has entered a new geopolitical reality. We insist that Ukraine and Europe must have a seat at that negotiation table. The key principle must not be violated. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Our territory and sovereignty cannot be a compromise. Ukraine must receive real, firm, effective, and long-term security guarantee. For 10 years, Russian aggression has caused irreparable damage to Ukraine environment and society. This includes the destruction of forests, the bombing of hydroelectric dams. Russia is the only state in the world that attacks such critical sites and occupy nuclear power. The occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant created the catastrophic situation in this region. The destroying of the Kakhovskaya Dam in 2022 flooded over 100,000 hectares of land, leaving nearly 1 million people without access to drink water. Now, Russia has illegally removed animals from the Askania Nova Natural Reserve. More than 300,000 hectares of Ukrainian land have been ecologically contaminated. A third of Ukrainian territory remain mined. I think it's very crucial, important to document all these crimes to ensure Russia face justice for the damage it has cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarkis Kandanyani, followed by Mr. Omar Terbak from Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank Tobias Winkler for expressed optimism when it comes to the peace in South Caucasus. However, it is quite disturbing when, while Armenia and Azerbaijan are discussing and negotiating on peace and normalization, the head of Azerbaijani delegation is bringing up new elements to this debate in line with the conflict narratives. But today I am not going to counter them with similar narratives and rhetoric, not because I do not have counter arguments, but because I'm committed to peace. Armenia is committed to peace. Armenians has also suffered a lot in the hands of Azerbaijan when it comes to human rights violations and violations of the international humanitarian law. But again, I'm not going to name them for the sake of the peace and for the sake of the future. When it comes to the deblocking of the regional infrastructure and communications, as my colleague already mentioned, Armenia submitted a written proposal to Azerbaijan, and we are waiting for a reaction. The same goes for the arms control. Armenia submitted a written proposal to Azerbaijan on mutual arms control based on the international law and standards. Again, we are waiting for a positive reaction. The people of South Caucasus and the future generations deserve peace and deserve living in stability. And we politicians have our share of responsibility in this. And my suggestion is let's talk on peace, not war. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our last speaker, Mr. Omar Terbak from Algeria.
Monsieur le Président, honorable assistance, je souhaiterais intervenir et aborder le point 8 de l'ordre du jour, en l'occurrence sécurité nucléaire. Et nous sollicitons au nom de l'Algérie votre indulgence pour nous donner un peu plus de temps et plus d'attention, une attention particulière pour vous parler de l'expérience algérienne et aussi des mesures entreprises jusqu'à nos jours. En effet, l'expérience algérienne en Algérie, ou bien de l'Algérie en matière de sécurité nucléaire, est marquée par un passé douloureux lié aux explosions nucléaires françaises réalisées dans le désert de Reggane entre 1960 et 1966. Ces explosions au nombre de 17 atomiques qui équivalaient 3 à 4 fois la bombe atomique larguée sur Hiroshima, ont laissé des séquelles profondes sur l'environnement et les populations locales, exposées aux radiations sans protection ni information préalable. Les conséquences sanitaires et écologiques de ces essais, de ces explosions, se font encore ressentir aujourd'hui à travers la contamination des sols, la persistance des déchets radioactifs et l'apparition de maladies graves et de malformations parmi les habitants des régions affectées. L'Algérie n'a cessé d'éviter ces explosions et leur effet dévastateur, plaidant une prise de responsabilité de la France en matière de décontamination. Faute de cette expérience tragique, l'Algérie s'est engagée avec détermination dans la promotion du désarmement nucléaire, la prévention et la prolifération et le renforcement de la sécurité nucléaire à l'échelle nationale et non seulement nationale mais internationale, réaffirmant son attachement et à un mode exempt d'armes nucléaires. L'Algérie attache une importance particulière en conséquence à la problématique de la sécurité nucléaire, élément essentiel pour garantir la paix et la stabilité internationale. Un peu de temps, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président. À cet égard, l'Algérie souligne que l'établissement d'un cadre efficace et durable de la sécurité nucléaire ne saurait être atteint qu'à travers un engagement international renforcé, fondé sur le désarmement nucléaire et la non-prolifération et reposant sur l'application stricte et complète des obligations internationales en la matière. L'Algérie adhère pleinement à l'arsenal juridique international relatif à la sécurité nucléaire. Depuis son adhésion en février 2012 à l'initiative mondiale de lutte contre le terrorisme nucléaire, l'Algérie participe activement, l'Algérie participe activement aux efforts visant à renforcer l'architecture mondiale de lutte contre le terrorisme nucléaire. Elle coopère étroitement avec les partenaires internationaux à travers ces points focaux nationaux et facilite la mise en œuvre des projets dans la région. Enfin, il est important de rappeler que l'Algérie abrite le siège de l'Organisation africaine de coopération policière, Afripol, qui joue un rôle central dans la lutte contre la criminalité transnationale, notamment le terrorisme et les crimes transfrontaliers. Merci.
Thank you. Colleagues, I would like to offer Rapporteur Winkler an opportunity to respond very briefly to any points they may have here in the general debate. We will warmly welcome 1 minute intervention from our rapporteur. because We have no more time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Nicholas Samkarachi from Georgia. Thank you very much for your intervention. You're right to remind us about Russia's interference in your sovereignty since 2008. I promise you to include this in my report. Nevertheless, I want to repeat my concerns about your democratic backsliding. And to Sergei Rakov from Belarus, it's about your sovereignty. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your presence, but we need your commitment to the rules-based international order. We need Belarus also to stick to that. And to Mark Wiese, we are very relieved by your words from the United States for reassuring your commitment to the principles of the OSCE, the UN, and the Helsinki Final Act. We need you at our side. We want you at our side. Fight together for a better world. The enemies are out there.
Thank you, dear Tobias. Colleagues, on your behalf, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all of today's speakers for their insightful contributions to our discussion, and more importantly, for their continued dedication to the critical work they carry out every day in the interest of our citizens. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to our staff for their efforts in preparing this meeting and to the interpreters whose skills help bridge our communication. Our committee will next meet during our annual session in Porto in June-July. I now declare the 2025 winter meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's General Committee on Political Affairs and Security closed. Thank you.
Congratulations.